There is a moment that comes after you finally turn off your screens, not just your phone, not just the noise outside of you, the deeper turning off. The turning off where you stop running, stop managing impressions, stop numbing, stop reacting. The noise stops and something speaks to you. The first thing people expect to feel and hear is instant peace and quiet. But that is not what happens. What you hear and feel first is what the noise was hiding. Restlessness, fear, grief, and resentment. Questions you have been avoiding for years. Underneath all of the noise, the real you. Your real life, asking of you truth and honesty. My name is Jerry. This is a Former Hermit and a Podcast. Welcome. If you are here for noise, opinion-driven rage, and political spin, you are in the wrong place. This podcast series is a place to slow down, find silence, recover, learn how to think, discern, live in truth and quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. For anyone of faith, secular, lost, confused, broken, hurting, or searching. Anyone who is exhausted from being overwhelmed, overstimulated, and distracted. Anyone who feels the only way forward is not louder, more opinion-driven rage and information, but clarity with a sense of purpose. To live with conviction, at peace. You do not need to share my worldview to benefit, but you do need honesty. Because truth does not cooperate with self-deception. I talk about something that modern culture does not tolerate or reward. Knowing how to think, not what to think. Objective truth, self-awareness, authenticity, submitting to the authority of sound reason, and knowing your why. Looking through a secular lens and a Catholic Christian lens because both matter. Two lenses, different vocabulary, same pursuit. Truth. In today's show, I want to talk about what happens when the noise stops, what you hear first. So what happens when you finally decide to turn it off? Not just your phone, your television, or the constant stream of noise, but when you turn off, step away and into silence and solitude. Let us begin with the truth. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of distraction. The first sound you hear is not peace. Sound does not feel good automatically or instantly. Modern culture cultivates, thrives, and feeds on instant gratification, where silence and solitude are not welcomed or tolerated, but treated as enemies, as voids to be filled. When you finally remove the noise, it is not what you expect or want. You come face to face with the honest reality of you and your life. Your first experience is a loud mind because it has been ignored. Emotions that have been ignored, suppressed, and or avoided. The deep interior wounds, scars, questions, regrets, fears, struggles, and unresolved issues you have been fighting with for years. The weight of unresolved choices and mistakes, the pain and stress of a life that does not match your values. This does not mean silence is failing. Silence reveals the truth. This is the first major lesson to learn and accept. The first thing you hear in silence is what is most unresolved. In my own personal journey, several years ago, as God drew me closer to Him, I did not know what to expect. I had no idea what it would be like to live away from the world, alone with God. I had questions and doubts, even after my life changed starting in April of 2004. Even as God had been telling me and preparing me for months to be taken away from the world and to be alone with Him. My human nature struggled to accept and understand what this was and what was really happening. Even over the prior 3 years, I lived a life of chaos, pain, and confusion. I was still not convinced or even willing to believe that this was God. And everything that happened and was happening was just my imagination. As my journey progressed, God slowly stripped from me the things I needed, but not the things I needed to live. I still refused to let go of my old life, the life I still hung on to and thought I wanted. As I tried to hold on, it was then God stripped and detached me from the only world I knew and its material desires, a car, job, money, and food. I became completely and utterly dependent on Him. He began to slowly reveal Himself to me, one painful moment at a time. I had no idea or understanding of the depths of darkness and the height of lightness that God was going to draw me into, at the same time drawing me closer to Him. Regardless of the path that led to that doorway, my mind was focused on the same questions, needs, and desires of the life I once knew, the memories, regrets, wounds, scars, and questions. What am I doing with my life? Where did I make the same mistakes? What did I do that led me here? What series of mistakes brought me to where I am? How could I have believed any of this? What do I believe is true and real? Who would believe any of this? Who am I? And what have I done? Become? What if I made different decisions? Why did I leave South Florida? The noise that was my life, regrets, choices, failures, mistakes, and fears was constantly racing in my mind, searching for answers and satisfaction to stop the pain, chaos, and confusion. Above all, more than anything, I wanted to prove I was going insane and that God did not really exist. This was not the time or the place where silence and solitude felt good. I could not hide, turn, or run away. I had no control over anything, how slowly or quickly, and what God was going to do to take me away from the world, until I was in a place of being totally and utterly dependent only on Him. When I came face to face with God the Father, I was slowly walking into the silence of God with no understanding of or about anything. I want to clarify before I go any further that the process of stepping into silence and solitude is subjective. No two people are identical. No two people react the same way to life events. There is no predetermined timeline. Feelings, emotions, and thoughts ebb and flow, which are beyond the control of the human mind. Everyone experiences similar life events to varying degrees. The only differences are what, why, how, and when. Scars and wounds from life Whether they are hidden, healed, resolved, or not, make no difference. It is of utmost importance to understand that under no circumstances to compare your life events and experiences to anyone else. Never assume your journey is or will be like anyone else's. If you are going to compare yourself to anyone, make sure it is you. So what you hear first. When the noise stops, what you hear. When you finally turn everything off and step into silence, you will start to hear noise. The noise is the mental distraction screaming for attention. There are different layers and kinds of noise. Each layer brings different reactions and revelations. The first layer is the surface or static noise. This comes from our daily lives, self-talk, to-do lists, daily and weekly replays of our lives, conversations replayed and imagined, and our compulsive planning. The most important concept to learn and practice is not to try to negotiate with the static. Do not try to understand it. Just observe it. This layer of noise is not the deepest, but the most readily accessible. This is your mind's instant reaction to withdrawal and detoxification, the pain of silence. The mind will race and try to connect to and recall the most readily available and recent noise for stimulation, the instant gratification it has been conditioned on. Through this secular lens, as you have fed your mind, trained and conditioned by instant gratification, your attention has been trained to scatter, living constantly on instant clips, posts, reactions, and headlines. When there is no noise or stimulation, no instant gratification, the mind screams for attention and demands stimulation to feed on. This is the mind and body's reaction to withdrawal. Looking through the Catholic Christian lens, the pain of silence forces the mind to search for stimulation that it has been conditioned to. It is here in the process that the mind is screaming and demanding attention, which is the most difficult to endure. The pain of withdrawal and detoxification amid this silence can feel overwhelming. Modern culture has conditioned and trained people to believe that pain and discomfort of any kind are intrinsically wrong and bad and to be avoided at any cost. To let go and just observe what comes to the surface through the pain and discomfort of withdrawal is contradictory to modern culture. Instead, first, the mind needs to quell the silence, find and feed on instant gratification. Second, the need to take control, know and understand the source of the pain, and stop it. As we go deeper looking into the second layer, this is the signal. In this layer, as you slowly get used to the silence and discomfort, the static will fade, which brings clarity. At the same time, the silence and clarity are uncomfortable, but they reveal what is usually true. The real you begins to surface in truth and honesty. You begin to see yourself as if you were looking in a mirror, unable to ignore, run, or hide. In the absence of distraction, deeper questions and thoughts begin to surface. A fear you keep avoiding, a grief you never resolved or identified, a desire you keep dismissing, a conviction you keep betraying. Coming face to face with yourself with honesty and truth is not painless, fun, easy, instant, or one and done. It ebbs and flows over time as you have life experiences. This is where self-awareness begins, not with self-esteem, but with honesty and truth. The next layer, the third layer, is perhaps the deeper or deepest. Over time, without distractions, the longer you remain in silence and solitude, the deeper and more apparent the clarity becomes. You will start to see a clearer, truer, and very different you, not the one you have been living, not the performance on command of the opinion-driven rage or the virtue signaling, but the real you and your life in more clarity the more you can see the real you. The deeper, more profound questions come to light, revealing more and leading to greater honesty and truth about yourself. It is here you will find the very anchor of your life, your very being, and every aspect of it. The most profound and deepest question of your existence and life. It may feel simple and easy, yet terrifying, which is why it is always avoided. Why? Why am I living like this? What am I seeking? What am I serving? What am I afraid of losing? What do I love most? The question of why. The entire foundation of the process in which you live. The very engine that drives your decisions, choices, priorities, relationships, habits, and routines. This is not the branding, slogan, marketing poster, bumper sticker, coffee mug why. This is the real why. The one that reorders your life why. This is the most profound question of a person's life, yet the most unpopular, avoided, and disliked in modern culture because it leads to the profound and undeniable realization that refuses to accept the very anchor of your life cannot be built on feelings alone. Feelings are information, not final authority. Your why must be accountable to the objective truth. Objective truth is discovered only through and with submitting to the authority of sound reason. The phrase submitting to the authority of sound reason matters. You stop thinking as if your emotional impulses are sovereign authority. You stop thinking as if your resentment is wise. You stop thinking as if your fear is prophecy. You begin testing your ideas and examining your beliefs to live as truth exists, whether you like it or agree with it or not. Submitting to the authority of sound reason as a form of humility. Submitting to the authority of sound reason is not cold, it is clean. It is the decision to live in reality and not react from a constant state of emotionally driven, opinionated rage. For today's show, here's a simple application and definition of submitting to the authority of sound reason. The disciplined habit of aligning your thoughts to what is true, real, and not merely what is loud. Clarity over confusion, evidence over impulse, coherence over contradiction, humility over certainty and virtue signaling, performance over long-term consequences and short-term relief. Through a secular lens, this is epistemic humility and cognitive discipline. You learn to separate perception from conclusion, emotion from judgment, and story from fact. Epistemic humility is understanding and accepting that human abilities are limited and fallible. The strength to admit, I might be wrong, and to let your confidence match your actual reasons. The refusal to pretend that certainty is a virtue, the habit and practice of admitting and understanding the limits of what you know, and being willing to always be open when the truth becomes clearer. Cognitive discipline is the daily practice and habit of governing your focus and your reasoning. It is choosing clarity over impulse and slowing down when you feel reactive. Define what you mean, check your assumptions, and refuse to let emotions do the thinking for you and become your sovereign authority in your life. Epistemic humility keeps you open to truth, and cognitive discipline keeps you faithful to the work of thinking, or in this case, learning how to think. A simple test you can use to always have clear thought. Ask yourself, what would change your mind? Can you name the strongest counter-argument to your argument? Can you pause long enough to separate facts from interpretations? If you can, you are not weak, you are free. The goal is never to be right at all costs. The goal is to be honest, clear, and anchored in reality. Start the habit as soon as possible. Before you speak or post something, ask yourself, I believe X because Y. What evidence is there that would make Y weaker? If you can answer that without panic, you are practicing both humility and discipline. Looking through the Catholic Christian lens, this is the harmony of faith and reason. Truth is not threatened by honest inquiry. Conscience is not preference. It is the call to the good informed by truth. Faith and reason are not enemies in the Catholic Christian tradition. They are companions. Reason is the God-given capacity to see what is true in the natural order, to think clearly, to follow evidence, and to make careful distinctions. Faith is not a leap into darkness. Faith is a response to God who reveals, trusting what God says because of who God is. Pope St. John Paul II's encyclical Fides Ratio gives us a simple image that frames the conversation. He says, faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth, and God has placed it in the human heart a desire to know the truth, in a word, to know himself, so that by knowing and loving God, men and women may also come to the fullness of truth about themselves. In other words, reason is not something faith must silence, and faith is not something reason must outgrow. When they are severed, the mind either collapses into cold reductionism or drifts into ungrounded feeling. When they are ordered together, the human person can pursue truth with both courage and reverence. Faith does not replace reason. Faith completes reason, elevates it, and purifies it. It protects the mind from two opposite errors. One, the pride that says, I only believe what I can measure, as if reality is no bigger than a laboratory. And two, the superstition that says, I do not need to think, as if God were honored by confusion. To this point in bridging the concepts of both lenses, cognitive discipline becomes a spiritual practice. Guarding attention, resisting emotional manipulation, testing spirits, and refusing to call impulse truth. Epistemic humility becomes a form of reverence, keeping in mind that I am not God, that my understanding is partial, limited, and fallible, and that the posture of a disciple is teachable, sober, and obedient to reality. Faith seeks understanding. Reason seeks truth. When both are ordered rightly, they do not compete. They converge, and they lead the human person toward clarity, integrity, and peace. A quote on this subject by Father Wade Menezes of the Fathers of Mercy. He writes, faith without reason is fanaticism. Reason without faith is secularism. Faith with reason is truth. Looking deeper to understand faith and reason, the question of why humility to submit to the authority of sound reason is necessary and ordered. Because authenticity is not expressing whatever you feel. Authenticity is alignment between what you say and what you do. Alignment between your beliefs and your choices. Alignment between the interior life and your words and actions. Alignment with the objective truth. If you want to be authentic, you must be willing to be corrected by the objective truth. Here is a simple practice for the week. The first sound practice. Looking through the secular lens, sit in silence for 3 minutes. No music, scrolling, input, or screens. Notice what shows up first. Do not argue with it. Just observe it and name it. Restlessness, fear, sadness, anger, regret. Ask yourself the question, what is this protecting? Then ask yourself, what would submitting to the authority of sound reason say about this? Write in one paragraph. If I were being fully honest, I would admit. Through the Catholic Christian lens, the examination for clarity. Place yourself in the presence of God. Ask for light. Show me what is true. Reveal what surfaced in silence. Name where you resisted truth and where you moved toward it. And with one concrete act of integrity for tomorrow. Two lenses, different vocabulary, same direction. Truth, clarity, and alignment. What is the point of silence? The goal is not to become a silent person who lives in a cave, unless God is calling you to discern that. The goal is to become a person who lives with clarity in the world, but is not owned by the world. Silence is not the destination. Silence is a part of the process. It reveals what is real. And once you see what is real, you can choose what is good. This is the beginning of the process of finding your why, not by inventing it, by discovering what is true and conforming your life to it. Here's a brief closing meditation. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders drop. For a moment, stop performing. Ask yourself quietly, what did I hear first when there is no noise? What truth has been waiting behind the noise? What do I already know that I have been refusing to admit? Now choose one small act of honesty for the next 24 hours. A simple alignment. One truthful conversation. One boundary. One confession. One decision that matches what you say you value. This is how you begin to build authenticity. One aligned choice at a time. As we close, here is a summary and points for self-reflection. When you finally step into silence, remember, the first thing you hear is not your true voice. It is a static layer of noise replaying to feed on instant gratification, your fears, other people's expectations, unfinished conversations, unanswered questions you have been avoiding, and the constant need to explain yourself. Silence does not instantly bring clarity. It reveals what has been forming you, and it gives you the chance to stop obeying it. What matters is that you stay long enough for the surface noise to settle, for the storm to lose its authority, to hear the difference between impulse and truth, between reaction and reason, between what the world keeps shouting at you and what your conscience has been quietly trying to tell you. Here are points for self-reflection. As you step into silence, the first layer of noise is your daily life. Self-talk, worries, compulsive planning, rehearsals, conversations, to-do lists, and emotional baggage. These thoughts are not commands. They are signals to only observe and name, not follow. Noise trains you to react. Silence trains you to discern. Clarity is not instant. Clarity is what appears after you remain steady in the silence. Submitting to the authority of sound reason begins when you slow down, separate feelings from fact, and refuse to be ruled by urgency. Self-awareness becomes possible when you start noticing patterns, attachments, excuses, and fears without defending them. Two lenses, one discipline. Through the secular lens, attention, cognitive clarity, and the skill of separating signal from noise, being open to submitting to the authority of sound reason and objective truth. Knowing human knowledge is finite and fallible. Through the Catholic Christian lens, stillness is a doorway to humility, conscience, prayer, discernment. What is true? Submitting to the authority of sound reason and the application of faith and reason to discern objective truth. And what is true beyond impulse? The goal is not emptiness, but alignment. A life that matches truth, your why, and integrity. Thank you for joining me. I invite you to join me for my next show, What to Do with What You Hear. Hearing the truth is one thing. Living it is another. If something stirred a thought, a question, a suggestion, or a disagreement, leave a comment. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Share with someone who needs quiet, clarity, and truth without the noise. You can find my book, coaching details, and additional resources on my website. Until next time, write this down and remind yourself often throughout your day. Just because the world around me may rage in chaos, confusion, and insanity does not mean I have to. Take a few minutes. Sit down. Take a long, deep breath. Relax. Be still and quiet in the moment. And feel it. Just one moment at a time. My name is Jerry. This is a Former Hermit at a Podcast.